Firstly, thank you very much for having me along. I'm very grateful to be here. I know you're all looking at this weird and wacky cape that I've got. My parents just came back from Canada yesterday and decided to bring it home for me. I spend a lot of time at festivals, usually with a shawl, a big Indian shawl from India, wrapped around me so I can dance with it. And this is one that just nicely caresses my neck, and so I don't have to hold on to it the whole time. So mum did well. But part of the reason why I brought it tonight is firstly because I wanted to wear it in, but secondly, also because there's this myth around meditation that it's religious. And unfortunately, that stops some people from participating in meditation. And yesterday, when my parents got back, they handed me this pamphlet. Someone in Canada was handing out a pamphlet to raise awareness around the fact that China has just banned meditation because it's seen as being religious now. And I know 2 years ago when I was in Shanghai consulting for a ghost town called Lingang, they wanted to create a wellness city and wanted me to assist them in how to activate the community and create a wellness city. But I know when I was over there, they'd banned yoga. And as a yogi myself, I found that completely bizarre, also because they think yoga is religious. And so part of the reason why I chose to wear this is just to bring that up, just to pre-frame this evening. But also myself, I do a lot of speaking. I've done a number of TED Talks, but I much prefer to facilitate. And so is it okay if tonight we're a little bit more interactive rather than me just trying to give answers? Is that all right with everybody? Cool. So talking about meditation feels a little bit funny. Kind of feels like an oxymoron where putting more information into the minds. And so I thought we'd start with an actual meditation. I'm just curious, who is a regular meditator already? Cool. All right. And so I'm just going to invite you to take part in a very short meditation. Of course, you have complete permission not to participate if you feel not to. But when you're ready, just find your feet flat on the floor. And just slowly close down the veil of your eyes. And on your next inhale, as if there's a string from the crown of your head pulling you up towards the ceiling, just elongate your spine. And on your exhale, just feel yourself sink further into the seat beneath you. And then just start to become aware of your breath as it cycles in through your nostrils, down towards your diaphragm, and then back out through your nostrils. No need to change the rhythm or the depth of your breath. Just become aware of where it is now. And then just start to become aware of all the sounds you can hear in your immediate environment, as if you've cast a net and you're just collecting your awareness, becoming aware of all the loud sounds, the subtle sounds. And again, just no need to label the sounds, no need to know what the sound is. Just noticing the characteristics of the sound, the pitch, the tempo, the volume. And then when we're ready, we're just going to start to use our imagination. So just in your mind's eye, just picture yourself sitting in this posture, in the chair that you're in this room. So you can see this room, you can see everybody else, and then you can see yourself. And then on your next inhale, you're just going to zoom out even further. This time you can see the whole building, the whole library. And then you can see this room, then everybody else, and then yourself, sitting in this very posture. And then on your next inhale, again, zooming out even further. This time you can see the whole block, out to the docks, all the buildings in this block, then the library, then this room, and then yourself. And in this scene, you can notice all the activity that's happening around us, all the people working on their computers, all the people driving, riding, eating, walking. So many different things we could be doing. And just so start to ask yourself, why did you choose to come here? Out of all the things we could have been doing, what was it about meditation? What was it about happiness that pulled you in to spend time here with us tonight? Hopefully no one's sitting there going, oh, holy hell, someone should have told me I was at a meditation talk. Hopefully we all know we're at a meditation talk, but we may not know really what the reason is that we chose to come. And so maybe it is quite significant for you. Maybe you really, really need this stillness right now, or maybe you're just curious. For some of us, this might be very important. And for some of us, it was just something to fulfill our curiosity. All right. And when you're ready to take a deep breath in, bring your shoulders towards your ears, and on your exhale, just breathing out and letting your shoulders drop back down to where gravity wants to place them, and gently blinking open your eyes. Cool. All right. Thank you guys for participating. Hopefully you enjoyed it. So before we get into it, the title, when I was invited to speak and I saw the title and I was trying to think about what I would share about the title, for me, something around the word happiness came up. And I just wanted to speak to this before I got into the rest of my talk, because I think it's very important to kind of pre-frame the rest of it. I wrote an article a couple of weeks ago around wholeness versus happiness. And the fact that, is it happiness that we're really seeking, or is it a sense of wholeness that we're really seeking? I'm sure many of you may have seen somebody, or you have a friend who always seems to be chirpy, always big smile, always full of energy. And in the beginning, you're wondering, wow, how is she always like that? I want that. But then slowly you start to wonder, really? Is that really what's going on? Can I see the real you? Has everyone either experienced someone like that or have a friend that's maybe like that? Yeah. And so from my experience through my journey of meditation and also my journey of just becoming, maybe not happy, but becoming whole, I think life is happy and it's also sad. And life finds its way through. And so whether we deal with the sad bits and the emotional bits and the painful bits now, or whether we suppress them with happiness and let them build up, they will find their way out at some point. And at some point, they may find their way out through something quite painful, because it will make its way out. But if we suppress it, it'll all kind of stack up. And so I wanted to pre-frame this talk by asking everybody, is it happiness that we're seeking, just happiness alone, or is it wholeness? Is it the wholeness of what the human condition is, the wholeness of what the human experience is? Do we all want to be okay in our sadness, be okay in our emotion and our pain? Because pain and suffering can be two different things. We can experience pain and not suffer from it, or if we attach to the pain, then we will suffer from our pain. And so to experience the wholeness of the human condition can feel very liberating without suppressing the bad bits. And so tonight, as I talk about meditation, I just want to pre-frame it with the idea that maybe it's not happiness that we're seeking. And this is obviously from my experience, from my perspective. Everything I say is from my perspective. But maybe it's not happiness that we're really seeking. Maybe it is wholeness. When we look at the word healing, which is for some of us maybe the reason why we're here, we're looking to heal some part of ourselves, the part that's anxious, the part that doesn't know maybe why we're doing what we're doing. We're looking to heal some part of ourselves. Healing, the etymology of the word, really comes from the word wholeness. We're restoring ourselves to the wholeness of who we actually are. Because maybe the pain and the suffering comes from us not being okay with parts of ourselves. And so I also just wanted to share this, just to kind of back up the thought that maybe wholeness is what we're really seeking. And so this is what I will be talking about tonight, meditation. So usually I start my story at 12 when I began my entrepreneurial journey. But tonight, my journey through meditation really started when I was 8. So when I was 8, I used to want to be a policeman because I thought it was cool. I'd get to have a gun and all this cool stuff and a badge, and I get to have authority. And so I started martial arts. And so at 8, I started martial arts, and I'm still a martial artist now, but I didn't know it at the time, but that was my very first taste of mindfulness. We used to stand up against the wall, and Sensei would throw beanbags at us. And we had to block the first beanbag, and if we was thinking about the last beanbag as the next beanbag come, of course we'd get hit. And so we had to think moment to moment, moment to moment every single time. If someone threw us a punch, we'd block that punch and then move on straight to the next moment. And so I didn't know at the time, but reflecting on it, it was my very first entrance into mindfulness. And it was probably one of the most experiential practices of mindfulness that I've ever done. And so I wanted to start there tonight. But my entrepreneurial journey started at 12. I was sitting on the couch watching Jumanji. Has everyone seen Jumanji? Cool. And so sitting on the couch with my brother watching Jumanji, and a World Vision ad came up on TV, and it was asking us to sponsor a child. And at 12, that was the first time I'd actually consciously understood what it meant to sponsor a child. And sitting on a comfy couch watching Jumanji, I could not understand what on earth had to have taken place for us to need to sponsor children today. And so I unfortunately switched off from Jumanji and was just in my head the whole time questioning why. Why is it that we need to sponsor children? And also, what can I do to influence this? And so I decided, I gave myself two options. Actually, I remember journaling that night, and I wrote in a very egotistical way that I want to be the one to make the biggest difference in the world ever. I just wanted to be the one to change the world. And so I was questioning how I might do that. And at the time, I was very inspired by Richard Branson and all the work that he was doing, using commerce as a force for good. And so I said, cool, well, I could either become a celebrity and be influential through my fame, or I could become a businessman. And I just really couldn't come up with a way that I'd become famous, and so I decided that commerce and business is probably going to be my medium to social change. And so I started my first business at 12, and then I got to 14 years old, and I realized, wow, whenever I try and sell and I get rejected, it hurts. Whenever I try and come up with a new idea, I come up with all these blockages. And so if I don't face my own stuff, if I'm not working on myself, I'm not working on my business. And so I started to become a personal development junkie. I went to Tony Robbins, to Diamartini. Every single weekend, I was at either a business seminar or a personal development seminar, and I had no social life. And so my parents would knock on my door as I was busy doing something very important and say, "Al, we have no idea who your friends are. You never invite them over. We want you to invite your friends over." I was like, no, don't worry, I've got friends. I was kind of tricking myself to think I had friends until one day I wanted to go bike riding and I had no idea who to call. And that was the moment through my teenage years when my heart dropped and I realized, shit, I am quite isolated. I've dug myself a hole, being so important, so busy, so entrepreneurial that I forgot about my friends. And so that's very much what shaped the reason why I do what I do now, which is very much about community, very much about personal growth. And they always say that for a lot of us, our pain leads to our purpose. And my pain in my teenage years was this isolation, was this lack of community. And so now what I want to give to the world is community, is connection. And so that's why I do what I do. But at 14, when I got into personal development, I remember I had a friend who I met at the Irish pub at Knox City, which we used to go out to every Monday night and get stupidly drunk, which I did maybe 4 times, and I learnt my lesson. But then I had this very conscious conversation with this friend who were out in the smokers' lounge, and we don't smoke. So we were trying to look for a real connection. While all of our friends were drinking and smoking, we all of a sudden struck up with this real conversation about Buddhism and about contemplation and about meditation. And we looked up local places to go and learn about Buddhism. And so when we were 14, we went to this place in Tacoma, out in the hills. I was brought up in Belgrave, if anyone's familiar with Belgrave and the hills, beautiful area. And so in Tacoma, we went every Tuesday night at 7:30 to an old man just had a little temple in his backyard, which he would give teachings to anyone who wanted to come, just donation. And so we'd go and just talk about Buddhism, and he'd guide us through a little meditation. And I remember the first night that I went home after one of his teachings, I just felt so clear. It was the first time I was ever actually able to observe thought. I was ever actually able to detach myself from my thoughts and my patterns. And as soon as I was able to observe thought and not be my thought, a very big sense of clarity comes. It's like when you're swimming and you, like a little turtle, bops his head out of water and all of a sudden it's clean and then you accidentally bop back down again. I'm sure some of us, if we've meditated before, you have these moments of absolute stillness, serenity, equanimity. It's like when you bop your head out of water and then life happens again and you come back down, and then maybe you meditate and you bop your head back out of water again. Has anyone experienced moments like that before? Yeah, very lucky. Now the goal is just to make them slightly bigger moments. But so Buddhism, at that point in my life, changed my life. And so my journey has very much been about working out, number one, how can I influence the state of our social existence? And secondly, the work that I need to do on myself in order for me to actually be influential in that path. And so tonight, I wanted to just touch on the role of meditation in two contexts. One, as a creative, as an entrepreneur. Who in the room would regard themselves as a creative of some type? Cool. And I also wanted to talk about the role of meditation just in the pursuit of being a well, happy, and whole human who would regard themselves as a human in the room. And if no one put their hand up, I'd be curious to talk to you afterwards. But so in the role of a creative entrepreneur, as soon as I started meditating, so after 14, when I started to get into Buddhism, I did take on definitely not a regular meditation practice. That hasn't really happened until the last 2 years. But I definitely started meditating. And the role of meditation in my creative journey, whenever I sit down to write, obviously as a creative, you have so many visions, so many ideas, and you're here, but you're always thinking over there. And I've been writing a lot about purpose at the moment. A lot of us are possibly seeking a deeper sense of purpose and what it means to be us right now. But we always tend to project our visions, project our goals, project our sense of purpose into the future. It's something aspirational. And we always forget to bring it back down to now, to the here and now. And so even when we are sitting down writing or reading or writing an email, whatever we're doing, we're always thinking about the future. And when I'm writing my book or when I'm doing whatever it is I'm doing, there's no way I can be as creative as I possibly can if I'm constantly thinking about the future. And so meditation has enabled me to observe that, oh, wait, my mind, my thoughts, my patterns have brought me into the future. I'm going to breathe. I'm here, I am writing, and write. And then when I don't know if anyone follows Pomodoro, the productivity time hack, but when my Pomodoro is finished, cool, then I'll let my mind consciously think about the next task. But the ability to notice the patterns of the mind and the way that it tries to drag us out of the present into the future has dramatically improved my productivity, my creativity. And now I do a lot of work within corporates as well through corporate wellness programs because they're starting to notice that obviously the peak performers around the world, if anyone listens to Tim Ferriss's podcast or anyone who's a peak performer, most of them have some form of practice around mindfulness or meditation. And it's because a flow state, I'm sure many of you have heard of flow states, when you're in the zone. The neural anatomy of a flow state is when your prefrontal cortex switches off. The prefrontal cortex is where your language is, the way that you talk to yourself, the way you talk to others. And so when you're in a flow state, and the flow state project, the flow genome project in San Francisco have done studies on this. They plug people in, and then they have them induce flow through these playgrounds that they developed, and they see what the neural physiology and anatomy is, and the prefrontal cortex actually switches off. Your sense of self switches off, which means you're totally present. And so when you're in the zone, when you're in flow, really you're just in total presence. And as soon as you realize you're in a flow state, you're not in a flow state anymore. It's like, oh yeah, I'm in oh shit, not anymore. And so as an entrepreneur, as a creative, as anyone wanting to do something creative in the world, mindfulness and being able to notice the patterns of our mind and return to presence is incredible in terms of our performance and our productivity. Has anyone been to India before or any part of Southeast Asia? Cool. My parents are from India, in case you're wondering where I got my natural tan from. And so I went to India last year for my first time. I've always wanted to see where Mum grew up, just to see what made her who she was. And so I went to India last year, up to Rishikesh and Dharamshala in that part of town. And of course, there is lots and lots of history, lots of spirituality, lots of colors, lots of spices, and lots of cows. You probably heard the saying, holy cow before, or holy shit. Well, the cows are literally holy over there, and so are their droppings. They definitely get right of way down the street. And so I did my meditation teacher training over there. I did my yoga teacher training in 2015 here at Australian Yoga Academy, and I decided to do my meditation teacher training. So it was a 500-hour, we meditated 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, for 4 weeks. And by the end of it, I could feel so much sensation through my body. They say, I did my Vipassana a week ago, came out on Sunday, which if anyone's familiar with Vipassana, it's a 10-day complete silent retreat. No talking, no reading, no writing, no music, no looking at anyone in the eye, no contact with anything but your mind, to get to know your mind. And so by the end of my meditation teacher training, I used to walk across Lakshmanjula Bridge, which that's actually quite a quiet example of what it looks like. Usually that little section in the middle there, it's usually that dense all the way along, and you've got scooters and mopeds trying to bust past you at the same time. But I could feel absolutely everything after my meditation teacher training. I could feel my pulse all over my body. I could feel the time difference between where my heart beat, then my left radial nerve, my carotid artery, and then my belly button and the crown of my head. Time difference. So therefore, I could feel the blood actually running through my body because you'd started to attune your awareness to very, very subtle sensations. And obviously, this was incredibly, whoopsie. I don't know what I did. Obviously, this was incredibly overwhelming to feel everything and everything within your own body. But the reason why it was so powerful is I've never been able to notice my mind so well and to notice the cravings and the aversions that I have. When we talk about wholeness and when we talk about even just happiness, the role the meditation plays is we get to notice the things that are causing us not to be in wholeness and not to be in happiness. I started to notice that I was constantly thinking about my partner and constantly attached to my partner, and I wasn't allowing myself to be okay with who I was because I felt like I needed my partner to complete me the whole time. And if I wasn't aware, if I wasn't mindful, I wouldn't notice this pattern that was taking place. And so in Buddhism, they talk a lot about your sanskaras or your klishas or your afflictions. And the belief is that our natural state is happiness or wholeness. And the only reason we're not always happy or whole is because we have patterns of the mind, we have habitual patterns. When we feel a sensation that is pleasurable, we crave it. When we feel a sensation that is maybe painful, we avert it. And as soon as we get into this pattern of craving and aversion, we create all of our habitual patterns which create our suffering. And so when we start to notice these patterns, as soon as I notice, oh, the ice cream, that created pain for a short amount of time. Last time, I need it. The needing of something outside of ourselves is what most of the time will create our suffering. And so meditation for creativity, incredibly powerful in my journey because it is the way to induce flow. It's the way to create space for creativity. Meditation in the pursuit of wholeness or happiness, for me, has been most powerful because I can notice the patterns of the mind. I can notice all of the stuff that goes on, which many of us try and shut out by looking at our phone or distracting ourselves in some way or another. But Vipassana, having to sit there and be with my mind 10 days straight, which was actually quite peaceful. In the beginning, you feel a little bit depressed and quite rude because you're not allowed to even look at anybody. But you definitely reach this point, like I said before, as if you've kind of surfaced up above the blurriness and the clutteredness of the water. And so I will go back to this one. And so in closing, I suppose, I wanted to put this quote up here. But I really encourage everybody, whether it is, and this is one of the things with meditation, it's made very clear in my Vipassana as well, is that for a lot of people, it's kind of life and then meditation and then back to life again. So we're in life and we may be stressed and full on and always busy, and then, a moment of meditation, but as soon as that timer ticks over, as soon as the bells ring, it's back to life again. But as soon as we can maybe let the floodgates of our time of meditation open up a bit so that it becomes mindfulness rather than just meditation, and the state of mindfulness and the meditative state of being clear and present can ripple out into our daily life, then we can start to notice the patterns that are maybe causing us to not be in the state of happiness or wholeness, and also notice the patterns that are causing us not to be in the state of flow, and therefore not being in our most creative self. And so I just wanted to leave by inviting us all. I always like to leave with maybe a bit of an activity as well. Sorry if I'm annoying. But I'm going to have my hands like this. When they're wide open, we're going to make as much noise as we can. They're going to slowly close, and when they reach here, we're going to make less and less noise until they come down and touch, and then we're going to sit in silence with our eyes open for maybe 30 seconds, maybe a minute, maybe a few, who knows. And then when I click my fingers, you're going to take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. Okay, during our silence, just want you to notice just your breath again and just any thoughts. All right? So are you ready to make noise? Sorry, are you ready to make noise? Yes. Cool. All right. Ready? You can stomp your feet, clap your hands, bang your knees, scream, yell, shout, squeal, maybe. Ready, set, go. Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for having me. And if anyone has any questions about anything I've mentioned or anything I'm doing, please come up. I do teach meditation, so if anyone would love any assistance with your journey through mindfulness, then I'd love to share that with you. So thank you for having me. Thank you.